Welcome, everyone. Welcome, 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 welcome. I'm Alexis Cruz, in case you guys don't know me. If you don't know me, I'm not sure why you're here. Discover, make new friends.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah. I'm Sterling from the Harley Heroes podcast. Alexis Cruz, thank you so much for coming out to Campbell and letting us pick your brain and ask you about some stuff. And
Sure, my pleasure. Great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. So I just kind of wanted to jump into it. How
Please, yep.
was it, being a part of Stargate? This is a huge franchise that has grown into something so big, and I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts of how it is and how it's grown so much.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Like, what a phenomenon, what a blessing to be a part of that, right? Because that's not something that anybody could ever predict in their lives. No matter like what you do for a living, you don't expect to luck into the luckiest thing of luckies. You're doing your work, you're chugging along, you're doing your thing. I've been an actor since I was 9 years old. I started when I was a child, and then it just blew up into this phenomenon that just keeps going, and then there's multiple generations now, right? So I'll come to shows and I'll see third and fourth generations, watching Stargate, just growing up on it. And it's amazing to see what was first a sci-fi drama for its time, and then be taken as this sci-fi adventure show and get popularized and widened without losing any of its specialness. It just sort of made more. It's really amazing, and to still be here this long afterwards. Amazing.
Yeah, and coming out to these cons and seeing,
Yeah, and just keeping that love going for the show and talking about it and how it's influenced people and how it's influenced me back over the years.
Yeah, and being a part of that, that movie, how was like the sets and everything like? That looked super cool.
Oh, it was great. And back then, right, there was far less CGI.
Yeah.
Because that was just starting, and we were just making inroads into that. So the only CGI we had, obviously the mask, the headdress thing, and then at the very end for our rebellion, when our people come over the ridge, and they start. So that was like 300 extras that they made look like 30,000 because they just took the same group and then copy paste. I'm simplifying, but that's sort of how it worked. And then everything else was built to scale and size. So the pyramid, they didn't build the whole top part, but they built about half of it, like out there. Basically the landing section of what would be the pyramid ship that it lands on. So that base was all real. It was all built to see. I mean, it was massive. And our actual village where we lived that had the bridge and the towers and all that, so that was real too. Like, that built that. There was probably about 4 blocks, maybe 3 blocks, of buildings and fronts and sets and what have you, all built to scale. And at the very end of shooting, we shot that in Yuma, Arizona. All the exteriors out. At the very end, we couldn't keep it up there because the state makes you take everything down. But we were out in the middle of the desert. Same desert where they did the original Star Wars, the Tatooine desert, or parts of it anyway. So at the very end, they lit it all on fire. And so we had this amazing, our cast and crew, there must have been 200-300 people, we all sat on the ridge, drinking beers, as the crew and the props and sets, they lit it all up. And it was this whole city just on fire. We watched it burn for like 3-4 hours, because it was all fiberglass and wood, and just beautiful in the middle of the desert, nothing around, just sand, fire, stars.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
And why, did you ever find out why they were just...
Well, because they couldn't leave it up there.
And
it
they
was
were
just
part of didn't want to take it down. So
yeah, it was part of the state. Once you're done with it, you're done with it, because you have to basically put the land back the way it was when you found it.
That's really cool.
Pretty incredible
experience. That'd be really fun. To go back a little different, you were one of the original members of a rock and roll group called the Teenagers.
Oh.
I wanted to ask a little bit about, or
No.
No?
No.
All right, my information was wrong. I am sorry.
Sort of. That's very meta. So, okay, so what you're talking about is there was a group called Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers back
okay.
in the 50s, right?
Okay.
That Frankie Lyman was the guy who sang Why Do Fools Fall in Love.
Okay.
So that was from the movie that I did, Why Do Fools Fall in Love.
Okay.
Lorenz Tate played Frankie Lyman, right? Do you know that's a Why do fools fall in love? Why do birds sing? Right? So it was him and his friends, and it was
Okay.
a biopic
Okay.
of them, and Vivica Fox was in it, and Halle Berry, Lorenz Tate,
Oh,
myself.
nice.
So I played Herman Santiago, who was Frankie Lyman's best friend and part of the original group. And it's one of these stories of the it's a band, but the lead singer gets famous separate from his mates, and he becomes big, but sort of screws over the guys he came up with, right? All of that stuff. So that's so you were
Sorry.
right and not right.
Wrong at the same time. That's totally fine. I was trying to get some stuff.
Hey,
that
watch
was a
more of
little
my
bit different.
movies, all right?
You were also on the Cosby Show.
Yeah, first season when it first came out.
Yeah, how was that?
It was great. It was incredible. I had just, again, I was a little kid,
Yeah.
so I was only doing commercials at the time, just breaking into the business, and it was a wonderful experience. Like that was my first big role, and it was an episode with Tony Orlando, and he was supposed to. There was supposed to be a spin-off series based on that particular episode. So Tony Orlando would get his own series, and I was going to be a series regular on that. So it was that whole story that spun it off.
Oh, wow.
And then it just didn't happen because
Mhm.
networks and the way stuff goes. But my career was launched from there.
Yeah,
and the rest is history.
definitely.
And I'm glad actually that that series didn't happen because I was so young at the time, and nobody in my family had ever been in this business, right? So I'm first generation. So I think it really worked in our favor that kind of stardom didn't come that early. My family didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to do, how to navigate all that. And then back then, again, in that time period, maybe now there's more resources, people have talked about that, all that stuff. But back then, we didn't really know enough. So I'm glad that all of that overwhelming success didn't happen that early. It happened a little later, when I had my sense of self, my family understood all that, and they were always really supportive.
Because I always wonder how hard that would be, like being a child actor in Hollywood.
Really hard. It's hard to be an actor at all.
Yeah.
It's hard to be a child.
Yeah.
So, just growing up for anybody is hard. But then if you're growing up with a profession where you have to be other people while you're still trying to sort yourself out, that's super complicated, right? Not everybody makes it. Not everybody can, or not everybody should, because you should sort of do one thing at a time. I just got really lucky. I had a wonderful support system with my family. And I, again, got lucky being trained early at a really, really fine schools for acting. I
Nice.
went to the Performing Arts School in New York, which is world renowned. It's the Fame School. Remember that show, TV show Fame? So, real place with legit program. And I graduated from there, and then I later went on to Boston University, to the conservatory there, and I did my time there. So all of that training helps while you're growing up. And it's still a process, right? Because when you're 10 to 15 to 25 to 35 to 45, you have to keep reinventing yourself constantly.
No, definitely. I mean, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Now in Stargate, the language,
Ha, yeah.
how was that? Like, how did the language come about? Like, did they have it all written out? Did you study?
Sort of. So that was real ancient Egyptian,
Oh, okay.
right? This is a language that hasn't been spoken out loud in 3,000 years, 3,000 plus years.
They really did a lot of homework.
Yeah, so there are Egyptologists whose sole focus is the verbalization of this dead language, right? Translating it from pictures to something we can read to talking. But there's very few people doing that because it's hard, right? How do we know what this stuff sounds like? So they hired this Egyptologist for the movie to actually teach us ancient Egyptian as it would have been spoken. Now, part of what was really great was the Egyptologist's work, like there was still a lot of holes and work to be done in this field. And they had never worked with actors before, which makes sense. Why would you think to work with actors on this kind of stuff? But we're very classically trained in speech patterns, in breathing and moving, in script critical analysis of words and how to translate ideas. All of these things that we take the word and make it 3D, 4D as we go through time and real space, right? And that changes how people talk, because even as we're speaking, some of the things that are filling, that our minds subconsciously are filling in the blank, is as I use my hands and I'm sort of painting pictures, even if it's not specific, but you're following along, right? All these things make a difference with language too, and context. And so these academians were looking at this dead language through the lens of academia, not through the lens of practical living. And so as we were working on this and preparing for the movie, Eric and I and Millie, who in particular are multilingual, could see all of these variances and starts adding to it. So as we worked with the Egyptologists, putting this language on its feet, we were able to find how to fill in some of those gaps and some of those loopholes and things that we discovered the academics were absolutely wrong on entirely, and other things that we could confirm for them, just as we learned and spoke. So we learned this language so thoroughly at the time that we were able to have conversations in between scenes, we would sit around in our chairs and have ancient Egyptian conversations. Now, that said, mind you, this was 3,000 years ago, so vocabulary was much more limited to some of the conversations we'd have today, right? Obviously because of technology and culture and what have you. So, you had 5,000 instead of 5 million words that you might use in the conversation. But it was enough to get the gist through, right?
Yeah.
And also, for me personally, I'm Latin, my family's from Puerto Rico, so half of the conversations we have in our own language is dropping words and, we pick up where each other is. It's so that sort of mismatched talking anyway. We have that sense of communicating in these numerous levels. And so that became applied to the Egyptian as well, and the context. And we could, that's how we could say a few words, but we knew this context we were talking about, so the whole conversation came to life. And that translated on screen with the acting, where you, even though you didn't know what we were saying, you knew exactly what we were saying in every little moment that was happening. You didn't need subtitles or, the sort of exposition translating, that you find in a lot of movies. What did he say? Well, he just said the spaceship is over there, right? We don't need all of that. And so for me as a kid too, because I was 19 at the time, I always thought about things like, as an actor, because this is what I've done my whole life, and what I've always wanted to do, we're not curing cancer, we're not launching rocket ships, right? So what space does this hold in the world? Is this even important, right? Or and this was before the internet, right? So I wasn't concerned with Instagram likes and things like that. I wanted, does my life hold meaning, right? And this was a wonderful experience because at the end of that show, we legit added value to world knowledge. We helped complete this academic field that is very important, that then leads to other understandings about language and culture around the world. And it wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for this movie and that interface between these academians and artists.
That's awesome.
And it was like a real practical, wow, this does matter. This does mean something.
Well, yeah, and seeing, or hearing from you how much detail they went into,
Yeah.
going back and learning about the language and everything. That's so cool to see, when they want to take the time to really, you know, put forth the energy, you know,
Yeah.
and sometimes you don't get that. They're like, we'll figure it out.
Right. Yeah,
Which
they
is-
really went top to bottom. They wanted to make everything as relatable, as real, as authentic as they could for a sci-fi show.
Well, yeah, and like hearing you talk about like the sets, it must have been a lot better to act in something where you're not
Yeah.
sitting behind a green screen like a lot of stuff now.
Oh, sure. That's always better.
Yeah.
And that said, you know, that's part of why I always gave sci-fi and fantasy actors a lot of credit, because we do have to. It's why you see on a lot of your favorite fandom shows, like hardcore theater actors, right? You see these actors who are like super legit, and they're like doing sci-fi superhero shows. And part of it is we have those skills to act with nothing around us. Oh, there's a puppet? Cool, that's real. Yeah, right? Oh, green screen. Oh, yeah, it's a blizzard now, sure. So when we can exercise and go that far with our imagination while we have all this technical stuff going around,
Yeah.
because look, if your set is all there, that's infinitely easier,
No, definitely.
right? Because then you're stepping into that situation. There's skills to both, you know, because even in a perfect setting, you're never really free to forget what you are, what you're doing. There's still lighting, camera, and other things going on. There's a symbiosis with the technical things that are going on that you can't forget.
Yeah, and you hitting your mark and making sure. All
finding
that.
your light, all
Yeah.
that, yeah.
Wow. Did you have a favorite part in the movie or something that you really struggled with in taping, or any like kind of funny story?
No, you know, not with the movie. I think the
Yeah.
film went fairly smoothly with all that, and I was really enthusiastic about every bit. So I don't remember anything being particularly challenging.
Because the movie was just such a big deal.
Yeah. And we worked long days. On the series, we had a lot of stuff, but then that was also years worth of stuff, right? So the
Yeah.
movie was, I was on the movie for 4 months, and on the series for 6 years, off and on, because I was doing Touched by an Angel at the same time, so I was splitting my time between both shows. And we had all kinds of stuff, but for me, the challenging part was the wig and the dress as Chlorel, because both were really heavy. Like the dress thing was like very burlappy. Underneath, it wasn't comfortable at all. It was very restricting, and the wig was very heavy. But that allowed me, in a way, as much as I was really annoyed with all of that, it allowed me to inhabit Chlorel in a better way, differently than Skaara, because Skaara is just much more relaxed and loose, and Chlorel is just a restrictive personality.
Yeah, he's very
So all of
strong.
those other things I was able to translate, right?
Mhm.
And it gave a different tone to the performance, and according to who was who, right? Chlorel was comfortable in that rigidity, and Skaara wasn't. So when I had to change, you could sort of see me being comfortable in my own skin, is what I was trying to get across, and then back again. And that was challenging, but fun.
Oh, I
Right?
bet. Yeah, because I mean, when you did the movie and then getting the call to do the show, like how,
Yeah.
I mean, like
Yeah.
you must have been like, yes, please.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. And I knew that it would help the show, because back then nobody really did that. Movie stars never did television. Television stars didn't do commercials, etc. But I wasn't a television star, and I wasn't a movie star. So I just liked to work on really cool stuff. And I was a sci-fi fantasy geek to begin with, growing up, before it became mainstream and it was all cool. You know, back when I had to be careful not to talk about it with anybody because they would think I was weird. So I understood from a fan point of view what it would mean to see somebody from the original cast of a movie bridging over to the TV show version, and that legitimacy, that credibility that happens, regardless of what the thing is. And I was like, all right, yeah, I'll be that guy. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't see that not working out. And sure enough,
Do you feel that nowadays it's way more, like, it's crazy, you were kind of saying that, you know, nowadays, like, not being, oh, I'm doing sci-fi, like, now, these cons and everything, it's so big.
Yeah.
And I never thought as a young kid, like, it would be this mainstream and this cool to be a part of. And it's just so much fun to be in this time and seeing these cons that
Yeah.
are smaller and, you know, getting you guys out like this, it's so much fun for us and being a part of it. I feel it's gotten bigger as time has gone on.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you can't put a cap on fun, right? There's, like, people keep seeing people have fun, and you want to be a part of that. So here's a con over here, everybody's having fun, and another con pops up, another con pops up, and why not keep spreading that fun? That's what we're all here for.
Yeah,
is to
definitely.
celebrate that and share that community. It makes everything better.
Nice. Is there any sci-fi project of all time that's something you wanted to be a part of?
I mean, you know, Star Wars called me, right? That's the dream,
Yeah.
ultimately. And that's more personal even now. Forget everything else. It's just, for my generation, that's the prize, right?
Well, and it's funny is we had Olivia in here earlier, and you know she was part of Star Wars, and she's like, it's something like almost like a, you know, not like a pinnacle, but she's like, they take
Yeah.
it very seriously, and it's a big deal, and it's,
Yeah.
you know, but I mean, Stargate is like that way for a lot of people, and
Right.
seeing it grow,
Right.
that you're a part of that, so it's always fun
Yeah.
to see your side of it. You're like, yeah, I did this big, but you know, this is something,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that
yeah.
I would strive for, I guess I wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I want to do all of the shows. I want to have, like, I don't care if I'm never do anything iconic on any of these things again. I'm happy with my part on Stargate, but I want to do something on Star Wars, something on Star Trek, something on a new Battlestar Galactica, right? So that's my goal, is to like just be
Oh, no
woven
way.
through the thread of everything sci-fi.
I think that's cool.
That would be awesome.
Because it's, you know, you're like, I'm not stuck to one thing, you know,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
being, you know, a little part in everything.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, being the iconic character is great, but saying you had a hand in everything would be pretty
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So I have a couple questions
Yeah,
that I
sure.
like to ask before we open it up, because I know there's going to be a lot of Stargate questions. So we have a couple questions we like to ask all our guests. So do you have a favorite superhero?
Favorite superhero? I have a few. They're all Marvel. I'm a Marvel guy. My two top ones are Daredevil and Captain America. I think are my two
Daredevil and Captain America?
go-tos. Yeah, completely different reasons.
Why? What are the reasons, if you don't mind me asking?
It's
It's just they're so different. That's why I kind of.
yeah, but there's like 1,000 different superheroes, you know.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, you're
I
fine.
think I grew up Catholic, right?
Uh-huh.
So I think that I always sort of identified with that storyline from Matt Murdock and
Mhm.
his
Growing up in
battling those, you know, that what he's doing in his life versus the dogma of the church and his religion and spirituality, all that. So I related to those questions growing up. What are the tenets of the Catholic Church versus mercy and this, that. You know, and Catholicism is very, very theatrical.
Mhm.
So flavor-wise, that was for me. And I just dug the character, and I love the idea early on of this superhero who was disabled, essentially, which is sort of a weird thing because Daredevil's not really, but he's blind.
Mhm.
But at that age, and for someone who was able, as I've been my whole life, you know, that just impressed on me early on to pay attention to those things. This was a superhero who didn't have the other superhero advantages. you
Yeah,
know?
like he wasn't
Right.
superhuman. Yeah.
Right. But over time, as you got through his whole story and then his interaction with other superheroes and other teams, like, again, within the realm of their reality, everybody wants Daredevil on their team, right?
Mhm.
Avengers, like, yo, come join the Avengers,
Yeah.
like 12 times already. And Daredevil's like, nah, I'm good. I'm
Yeah,
doing
gonna
my
do
thing. So here's this sort of street level guy who doesn't really have, like all the top dudes want him on their team, but he's just doing other things. Like he needs to stay with the people on the street that the Avengers, they don't have the time for,
Yeah.
but he does. So there's something about that that just always connected with me, and then it's just the great teams, right? The Bendis and then Alex Maleev, their run was great, and Miller's run was fantastic. So I followed all of those. And then Captain America, just because I think Captain America is such an amazing representative metaphor for what I want our country to be. And all of the positions that Steve Rogers, that particular character, has taken, really aligns with me, aligns with my politics. My family's from Puerto Rico, so whenever I look at his uniform, and so it's Captain America, but it's my Puerto Rican flag as well. It's the one star, right? So it's the same thing. So I have some relation there, right? This is all stuff we make up in our heads to connect with our heroes. So there's a genericness to the mantle, to the title of Captain America that I dig, but I dig the particular Steve Rogers, and then Peter Parker, Spider-Man, is my guy. All of my clothes, like we have geekwear stuff that we buy all the time, is all Captain America and Spider-Man. That's all my stuff.
So now that you've given me your hero, who's your favorite villain?
Magneto, Magneto, and then maybe Loki.
Oh, okay.
Maybe.
You like that big
Except,
helmet? Yeah.
No, I just, because Loki goes back, I'm a fan of mythology as well, and Joseph Campbell, and I went to school for anthropology as well later on. So the idea of Loki stories where he sort of flips back and forth, and I'm fascinated with how bad does he get, and then how good does he get, and figuring that out too for the sake of redemption is a theme I'm interested in general. And so stories about redemption and grace are of particular interest to me. I couldn't even tell you really why. That might take months of conversation and lots of drinks. But the idea is attractive to me. So I like studying what we as a society and we as people feel is, what are our efforts to give people redemption? What do we feel people can come back from, what they can't? How do we judge that and regulate that in our society? All of these sorts of things is, to me, what that goes towards when I look at Loki. And I see how people flip on whether they like him or not, whether he's drawn how badly or not, right? Because there's some stuff that I don't know if I'd be his friend after that, and other times we wouldn't. So so just the idea of how do we make those decisions always comes up, And then Magneto, because I grew up with the X-Men, I always identified with the X-Men, and I couldn't pick one out, which is why I didn't list them on my heroes, but like as the group, like the X-Men was my jam, right? That was all about X-Men, Nightcrawler and Colossus, right? Thunderbird, like ever from way back, the Storm.
Yeah.
So Magneto was like the realest of all the bad guys ever, and again the way he flipped back and forth because he was redeemed. But then not, because he has some extreme stuff. And then I can't get with that side. Like when he goes to there, I can't get with any of that. But you understand, like a lot of these, and I think it's the same with most people when they read comics, is that you are watching conversations happening between these types of people, some that you look up to and some that you don't. And they're dealing with issues that some that you look into, that you're dealing with, and other issues that we're never going to be anywhere near, but are important issues in the world, right? So all of that sort of had made an impact on me growing up, and my reading and my thinking.
Yeah, no, you got like a lot of comic book
Magneto's
knowledge.
just
This is nice.
Badass.
No, I love it. My last question for us, and this is very random. There was a zombie apocalypse,
Yeah.
and you had to choose a weapon, but it couldn't be a gun. What would it be?
A katana.
That was easy enough. I like that.
Yeah, I'm a swordsman. I've been a swordsman since I was a kid too, and all that.
Oh.
Like, I love swords. I've collected swords. I know how to use most of them.
So that started at a young age then?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
How did you get into that? Was it something you
It was
just saw
kung
and
fu
you liked?
movies and.
But I'm just
you
saying,
know,
like,
all
was
that
it like,
stuff,
that's
yeah.
what I want?
All that
Like,
stuff.
you know, that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. It was the kung fu movies at the theaters, and you know, Dungeons and Dragons. Like,
Yeah.
I ran my first D&D game when I was 15.
Nice.
My birthday when I was 15. Play from there. So again, mythology, medieval weapons,
Mhm.
different cultures, all of that stuff. The idea of being a warrior and all of that
So
was.
Stargate was really perfect for you, like, at a young age.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. It was
it kind of
absolutely.
resonated.
It completely resonated in so many ways, and then not only did it resonate already, but it informed me on a lot of things of interest and paths that I would take later in my life. You know, it was sort of symptomatic or symbolic of those things that I would grow into.
Yeah, because a lot of, you know, a lot of other actors are like, oh, you know, I wasn't really into that, but now, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It brought me into that world, and I'm super into it. But
Yeah.
you don't really hear it where they're like, no. I was into
Yeah.
this
No, I was
way
down.
before,
Yeah.
and now it blew into this. So like, it was already, you know,
Yeah.
kind of deep seated. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Living the dream.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I did want to open it up to questions. If anybody has any questions.
So either the movie or the series, what was a really funny blooper that happened?
Well, I almost broke the camera on the movie because we were shooting that day. I think we were on 27 hours straight. We had been going. Yeah, and we were all just at the end of our, you know, lucidity at that point. And we were moving setups, and I switched. Kurt was sitting here, and I was sitting over there, and I had to switch over. And I got up and just fell right over onto the camera. The whole rig fell over.
Oh no.
Yeah.
How was he to work with?
He was fantastic, awesome. Kurt is exactly what he presents himself to be. As far as I knew, as far as I got to know him on set, and it was like he is everything you imagine him to be. Exactly everything you imagine him to be. That's Kurt Russell, and that's great. It was great to, like, you know, you meet one of your childhood heroes and they turn out to be super cool. Because nothing sucks more than like meeting one of your heroes and then they're jerks, you know.
Backdraft used to be my movie back in the day.
Yeah.
He was awesome in that movie. Do we have any other? Yeah.
Just, why were the hours so crazy? I mean, that sounds.
You know, it was
was
a-
it purposeful for maybe getting the right mood going for the actors, or is that just like?
No,
why was
it's
it so crazy?
that's the logistics of movie making. You know, this was such a huge, complex movie with so many moving parts to it, and because they wanted to be very specific and they wanted to bring quality to everything. So just lighting a thing, right, was constant tweaks, and like to you and I, we might be there and like, yo, you already lit it, everything's done, like what is this? But to these guys, everything makes a little bit of difference. Just where where it is, whether there's a flag on it, the quality of it, what they can do with what they have as they're projecting to what's in the editing room, right? Because so you're making decisions based on the now and based on the conditions of the future in your post, and finding that middle. All these things takes time. Then you have 12 different departments all doing that and having to come together. So it's a lot of hurry up and wait. And all that takes time, and over, you know, the first day you don't notice it. You just put in a good day's work. But you only got half your agenda for that day. And then the second day, the same thing happened, third day happened. By the end of the first week, you realize, oh shoot, you're now a whole day behind. By the end of the first month, you're a week behind. But what you got was amazing, so you keep pressing forward. And as long as you have producers and the money people who are okay with what you're getting and can keep funding that, and we got really lucky because Dean Devlin was an amazing producer who was able to get the money for this budget, which was, at that time, was astronomical to begin with, right? We started on like 40 million. At that time, it was like, what? That's it, you know? And it climbed up to 60 million. They were like, what? And then it got to 80 million, you know, and that was like Waterworld numbers, right? And Waterworld had just happened at that time and bombed terribly. So here's Dean Devlin going back to the money people, and you know, the newspapers are all like, Waterworld disaster, and Dean Devlin's like, can you give me another 30 mil?
Yeah.
You know, that's a hard ask at that time, but he got it done. He got it because what we were making, what we were creating was so special. The lightning was in the bottle. But that's part of why it takes a long time. So you're just sort of racing against those aspects to try and get as much of that lightning in that bottle before time and money runs out, you know. And that's where the talent comes in of who you have on that project, artistically and technically. Everything has to work in tandem.
Right, so the orchestrating all those groups.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the timing and the money and everything.
yeah.
It's mostly on that's mostly on the producer.
On the producers, yeah, yeah, the production team, and then how they break that down. The unit production manager, the first ADs are very important because they're the ones on the set calling everything.
That's crazy,
Yeah.
27
Yeah.
hours.
So so that's just 4 months of active principal photography. And, you know, you had 6 to 8 months pre-production, and then another 6 to 8 months post-production. It's a lot.
Taping in the desert too, that must have been rough.
140 degrees every day. Yeah, people were dropping. It was,
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, yeah, I'm gonna have to go back to my trailer
Yeah.
and cool down for a little bit.
yeah, we had a lot of that.
Yeah. Do we have any?
Now, I myself have had experience working on film sets, and I get what you mean. After, of course, the longest I've ever worked was 15 hours, which I'm glad for the union rules, like 12, which, thank you. And of course, for me being on set, which I'm always just a crew guy, for an actor, what helps you get through, you know, working on set for so long? What helps you, like, get through the day?
Everybody's a little different, but we get a lot of breaks. We do get a lot of breaks because, again, it's hurry up and wait. We have to wait for sets, for wardrobe, for lighting, for camera. We have to wait for all of that stuff. The smart actor is going to take advantage of those breaks to recoup
Sleep.
himself,
Yeah.
sleep. And it is a skill. The catnapping skill is a real thing. Depending on where you go, I was actually trained in it. There was a thing where I was taught. But I love to sleep anyway. I'm a cat myself. I relate to cats. So you use that, whether it's 10 minutes or 15 minutes or even 5 minutes, but you know how to go into your deepest sleep quickly and then how to come back out of it. And that's a part of what we do. You know, that's part of our magic. Right? I don't, you know, you go through your lens, and I don't know anything about what you're seeing through the lens and what it's supposed to mean. I couldn't tell you anything about that. But these other things we have, you know, which makes what you do work. Because I can't afford to be tired or in between when you're ready. I got to be ready to go when you're ready. And I'm going to be the one that everybody's looking at. They won't be looking at you. They'll be looking at, so the skill is knowing everyone else's job just well enough to know where your job fits into it. And that's how, as a team, you make things happen. Right.
No, definitely.
Like they say that about Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves, like one of his thing, one of the reasons he's such a superstar is everybody loves working with Keanu Reeves, right? Jury's out on, everybody has their own opinion. Like, is he an amazing actor or not? But He knows everyone's job. Everyone's job. He knows exactly what everybody's supposed to be doing, and he knows how to put himself right in that then position for everyone else to do the best job that they can do, which in turn makes him look amazing every single time. So, is he a good actor? Yes, he is, because that's exactly part of what we do. And he's still making movies, and we're all still liking his movies, so, all right.
Looks like he hasn't aged either.
And
Like,
he doesn't age,
Yeah,
right?
you're like, geez, how do you still look the same?
Yeah.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, so with Stargate Origins and Stargate Command, there's new kind of Stargate stuff happening. If you got the call, would you return to Stargate?
Absolutely, yeah, in a heartbeat. In fact, I talk to those guys a lot. I'm working with them pretty closely to see what we're gonna do with all of the new stuff coming out with Origins and SG Command. There's a lot of really interesting, big plans in the works, and it's still early. I'm really excited about it because there's so much that we have in the Stargate universe, and what these guys are doing and sort of bringing it back and putting it together again into a cohesive cosmology for Stargate moving forward is really, really amazing, and the new stuff that they're creating. So right now, like they're putting everything together and looking at what pieces need to be filled, what doesn't need to be filled, what can we do. And it's super exciting because here's this legacy thing with so much potential yet to still manifest, right? So much potential. So it's really exciting about it. And yeah, I'm in talks with them on a couple of things that we should be seeing pretty soon, within the next year. And I mean that pretty immediately. You'll be hearing some pretty exciting things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anyone else?
How long did it run up until recent? Is it still, I remember watching the Atlantis.
Right, the SG1 had 11 seasons, Atlantis had 5? I could be wrong. I think they had 5, maybe 6. And then Stargate Universe had 2 seasons. And that was the end of season 2 of Universe, I want to say was 5 or 6 years ago now-ish, something like that. And then Origins just came out this year. Yeah, which was like a web series of 15-minute episodes. And then they sort of put it all together into, it comes out to about an hour and a half. So it's like one new Stargate movie that they cut into episodes.
I think they made some like full-length feature.
Yeah, and the Continuum, and some of the other two, I wasn't in them, so I don't know what they are.
Awesome. That's all the time we have. Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming up.
Yeah, make sure you guys go check out the Hardly Heroes table. We got T-shirts for sale, and
Yep.
you can talk to the guys.
Come
Tell
on my
them I mentioned
table.
me. Yeah.
Find
Cool,
us on
yeah.
social media. You know, I'm Alexis Cruz-929 on everything, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook,
Yeah.
Alexis Cruz-929.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Thanks
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.